I want to talk about the enterprise program in the Forest Service. Next. So the enterprise program was created in '98, the way it works is it creates teams of internal suppliers. So this is, if you think about work that's being done, there's work which we do for the public or for the land or our basic mission work, and then there is the work which supports the mission work. And this is about being more effective in the work which supports the mission work. And so they created teams of internal suppliers that were doing things like biological assays, programming databases, doing documentation, doing archaeology, and so forth. All the things that a forest supervisor would buy in order to get their mission accomplished. And the forest supervisor had the choice between hiring someone to do that job directly, using a detailer, going with an outside firm, or hiring enterprisers. So there was no pressure whatsoever to use enterprisers. It was entirely a matter of choice on the part of the line officers of the organization, whether this was the best way to get the job done or not. In exchange for that, the teams had great freedoms in which the way in which they operated. So they traded having an allocated budget for freedom. Next. This just shows by 2004, you can see all the places in the country where enterprise teams were functioning, and you can see that it's pretty widespread in the areas where the national forests are. Next. So what were the operating principles? How did this system work? Well, first of all, we set up the Enterprise Bank, which was the governing body of all of this, and they gave the teams the license to operate. Once they had their license, the teams could choose their own customers and their own members. And so no manager could force a member into an enterprise team, and no manager could extract a member from an enterprise team who wanted to remain in that team. So that was the beginning, was a lot of freedom around that sort of issue. Next. So as I mentioned, enterprise teams were allowed to compete with any other way of getting work done. On the other hand, there was no compulsion of anyone to use the enterprise teams. So it was an internal market system, essentially, that was functioning, that gave great freedom to the teams. Insolvent teams would be dissolved, and they would be treated just the same way as somebody who was working on a project which came to an end and had to find another job within the federal government. Next. The teams billed their clients for money at full cost and put that money in their bank account, which was an internal bank account in the enterprise bank. They didn't actually own this money. It still belonged to the federal government, but they had the control over that money. So they had discretionary budgets if they had been successful in delivering services for less than they cost. The money remained in the bank until they used it. It was not zeroed out at the end of a year. And they could spend that money pretty much as they choose, with some exceptions. For example, they didn't get to choose what salaries they paid themselves. They didn't get to go around the purchasing department and so forth. So there was aspects of the control system still in place for them. Next. Next. They had to obviously stay within the bounds of law, and they had to stay within the bounds of policy. Although there were some waivers given to certain policies, they had to stay within the policies which applied to them. All assets are remaining property of the agency, and they were not allowed to put the organization at risk. Next. So one of the questions that's asked is, well, how did you measure the performance of these people? And one way, of course, is customer satisfaction. And you'll notice in this survey of customer satisfaction, 89% of the folks said that they met or exceeded their expectations, and only 7% said they underachieved their expectations. I suspect that's a fairly high number. So basically what's kept this program alive is that the customers want it. Next. This is another way of looking at measuring success. So this is a graph of the businesses collectively in the enterprise team system, and you can see that line managers are choosing to use enterprise teams, and that those are free choices. So this is a very good management, it's a very good measurement of whether they're producing value or not. Either they are producing more value than they cost, or they are not producing more value than they cost. And the judgment is made by line managers, not in general, but on each specific task which they take on. Do I want to use these people, or do I want to use the other three choices which I have? This is actually much better feedback than an annual appraisal. It's much more honest. We all know that that when it comes time to appraise people, we have certain other things in mind than being as brutally honest as we can be about what we think. But here, there's no reason not to be brutally honest. Sorry, I don't want to use your service anymore. End of story. No review, no nothing, no consequences. Next. Each individual team is also being monitored. So if you look at Digital Visions here, they had $17 million in the bank. They billed $28 million. They spent $26 million. And so now their internal bank account was almost $2 million. That's a group which is doing very well and very comfortable knowing that their jobs are secure. So they can tell the truth. They can choose their customers to the places where they can add the most value. They can fire customers who are not nice, and so forth. Other groups are not doing so well in this thing. So above and beyond ecosystems, losing money, and needs to get stuff fixed, which indeed they did. The group is doing well. So here we have a very strong annual review, which is determining whether they're adding value or not. And we also have the ability to make mistakes without bad things happening to you, as long as you have been successful in the past, up to the point of the deposits that you have in the bank. And so you get people willing to do things, thinking strategically about the future. What database products will people need 5 years from now? We better begin training the team on that now. But this strategy is being done way down in the organization, really thinking about what the agency is going to need to accomplish its mission in the future. Next. The benefits of this free enterprise system: you don't have to staff for the peaks anymore. You just hire the teams when you need them. And so there's a great deal more of that going on. The customers get what they want when they want it. You get specialization and economies of scale without the kind of power that comes with being a staff group, which often turns into a police group rather than a service group. And all sorts of innovation, and you retain people. I think it's just about time to bring Laura on. Thank you.
While we're making this technology transition, I want to share with everyone that, for me, what was so striking when I first read the case study regarding the enterprise teams is that, one, the time frame in which they did it. We're talking, this is what, at least almost nearly 10 years ago, I think.
98 is more than 10 years ago.
So much more than 10 years ago. And so, for me, it was quite innovative. It was a bit daring. And I loved all of the data that existed for us to take a look at how well they did. And the data actually shows that they did quite well. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was just a really impressive example of intrapreneurship.
Was that used for standard production or only for special one-time projects and innovations?
The enterprise teams often have a lot of repeat business with the same customer. So let's say you're a group that's doing NEPA analysis and preparing NEPA reports. Well, that's something that a forest supervisor needs on an almost continuous basis. So you become their go-to person for getting that kind of work done. But you're not just having one customer, you're having multiple customers. So if that forest supervisor needs less of that for a moment, you transfer your attention to somewhere else. Did I answer your question, Aaron?
Yeah, more or less.
All
Okay.
right, great. Any other questions right now while we wait for the transition? Yes.
Did this program have a special legislative authorization? Because some of the things you described are things that I do not think a normal federal agency would be allowed to do under law.
It did not have special legislative, but it obviously went through a 9-month process of discovering how you could do it within the context of the current law. And there are OMB letters and so forth that state that this is all permissible. I think that it is not only permissible, but the fact that it produces a 1.8 times improvement in productivity, which was part of that report that I forgot to mention, means that if we were meeting this level of efficiency throughout the federal government, we would not have a deficit. And so this is strategically important. It's something which could be expanded inside the federal government, and it is been thoroughly vetted by the lawyers to say, we did find a way to do this.
Well, I think that's probably the most fascinating part of the story then, because, for instance, you talked about the teams selecting their own members. And I could see if in our agency we had some vacancies that we were filling by a method other than posting it and allowing applications and going through the prescribed method, then anybody who's disappointed not being appointed to that position could complain that we were violating the civil service rules.
And so this is an area where there's been considerable conflict in the system, and we have not always achieved the purity of the operating principles. So you're right in saying that that's an area of pressure from the existing law that makes it not always quite come out that way. But it is largely true that the teams are able to select their own members.
Thank you.
Also, bad managers probably don't like it because they lose all their people constantly. I mean, if you're a bad manager, if you have a bad manager and there's an opportunity for all his people to go somewhere else, anywhere else, hell, they're out of there.
That may well be true, but the enterprise team system is not yet large enough to cause that conflict to be serious. And in many cases, managers found this was born in a time of radical downsizing in the Forest Service, and so in many cases, what was happening is that managers were saying, "I can't afford to hire you full time anymore, but I can't afford to buy some of your time." And so it worked out. The interesting thing is that the union was very supportive of this, not at first, but then they began to see it as an alternative to outsourcing. If we can make the way in which we supply services internally more efficient than outsourcing, then we can keep jobs in the agency, and it has served that function of keeping jobs in the agency as opposed to outsourcing. We've also had outside vendors claim that it wasn't fair, but actually it is fair.
So what we're going to do, because we appear to be having a technical difficulty with Laura, is we're going to be agile, we're going to be entrepreneurial here, and just take this agenda into our own hands. It is ours after all. So what I'd like to do is maybe take one more question, and then I'll move forward to introduce our third speaker, Bethany Blakey, who's with the PIC, who's going to go in detail into the entrepreneurial traits as researched by Gallup. So any parting? Okay, we'll take both of these ladies here, and there's a mic coming up behind you.
Hi, thank you very much for this case study. I noticed that it started in 98, and during that time there was the reinvention of government was going on, and there was a lot of interest in the Clinton and Gore and support of that for federal agencies, and I felt it at the state agency level where I was working at the time. So I'm interested in learning more about the sustainability, because this is a good example of here you are showing us the improvements from 2011. So this agency has been able to sustain this kind of innovation over a period of time. That's very challenging to do. And then also about the implementation and trust. And when you go to kind of a radical idea where budgets are downsizing, do people want to let go of that government job for this more entrepreneurial opportunity that might be more rewarding? Or are there any things that they did to increase the trust or to incentivize or help people make that transition? Or was it even needed?
First of all, I would just say that this actually started in '94, when I was the lead facilitator for the reinvention of the Forest Service.
Okay.
And then it took 4 years for anything to happen, which, we were just lucky that the team of people who are working on that, 3 of them all ended up in the California region, the regional forester and 2 forest supervisors who were behind getting this launched. And so then we put together a steering team, which spent quite a while working out, okay, how are we going to do this? And then launched in '98. So that's, I lost the second half of your question.
About trust or incentivizing, having these employees who would make great enterprise team members, how to help them make that transition, to really make that leap.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that helped a number of the early enterprisers to make the leap is that they were on the RAPS list. And so there wasn't a huge risk in moving into this new area. That was not by any means true of everybody. And I'll tell you a story about one of my favorite people. Jenny Bradley was sitting in the back of the classroom when we were teaching. She had her arms folded and her head down like this, and she wasn't taking any of it. She had been planning to quit the Forest Service, and she figured, well, I might as well take this course and find out what crazy things they're up to now. And she said to me, Gifford, how many people am I supposed to put in my business plan? And I said, Jenny, it's your business plan. It's not me to decide that question. That's for you. Next day, how many people am I supposed to put in my business plan? Jenny, I think I already answered that question, blah, blah, blah. Next day, same question, except this time a little more vociferously. She said, don't give me any of that crap. I've been in this agency long enough to know there's a right answer to everything. Now just tell me what it is and I'll put it in my plan. She went into the ladies' room with Faye Fendeman, my associate who was teaching the course with me. And I don't know what happened in the ladies' room, but what came out of the ladies' room was a fire-breathing dragon. She was standing up straight. She was ready to go. And she launched Recreation Solutions, built it up to 35 people, supplying planning. She did plans for 44 national forests, the National Forest Plan, the State of California Forest Plan, the BLM Plan, recreation plan for all those agencies, and they were in some other businesses as well. And so what she showed was that here we were about to lose a really entrepreneurial employee who was just sick and tired of the bureaucracy. And instead, by freeing her, we got all this very, very effective work being done all over the agency and even beyond. So the trust came about, in her case, because she trusted herself. And she obviously trusted me. And she trusted that this program would, in fact, protect her. But there was also an aspect of, you know, if some reason this doesn't work, I was going to quit my job anyway. I didn't really have anything to lose. I certainly wasn't going back into that old system. And this is something that we find with enterprisers, is that they often stay on beyond the retirement age, which has been very useful to the Forest Service because there was a bimodal age distribution in which most of the Forest Service was either within 5 years of retirement or in their 20s. And so what we're going to do is lose all understanding, but what happened is the enterprise teams took in the people in their 20s and mentored them into really understanding how to do a particular job, and now they're continuing on. And the old guys stayed on well past when it was financially a good idea for them to retire because they were having so much fun.